And to those of you watching at home, we are just about to get started with the call. If for some reason that you want to ask a question, it's preferred if you call the number that you might have seen on my Facebook page, or go ahead and type a question in Facebook, and I have a couple of assistants here who will try to pass me those notes. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. So those of you watching at home, we're doing this in lieu of a live town hall event. I'm down here in the state capitol in Springfield. This is one of the committee rooms. And so thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is State Representative Tom Morrison, and I'm coming to you live from the Illinois Capitol in Springfield. I appreciate you joining me tonight. We have some viewers watching online, and some are by phone. And tonight we're going to discuss some of the pressing Illinois issues, as well as some of the current bills down here at the Capitol this spring session. If you do have a question and you're listening by phone, please press *3 at any time, and your name is going to be put into the participant queue. And we're going to call on some of you during the hour to ask your question, or if you'd like to make a brief comment live, I'd like to hear your feedback. Again, if you'd like to ask a question and you're on the phone, please press *3. So this is the last week of the spring legislative session in the Illinois House. As usual, it's going to be a blistering pace till the close Monday, May 31st. We are scheduled to meet each day until then, including on the holiday Monday. And this happens almost every year. The big issues like the budget, as well as some of the more controversial bills, they get held off until the end. There's this huge pile of bills to get through, and some of these bills that should get more scrutiny often do not. At the same time, a lot of Illinois residents, they're shifting their focus to the holiday weekend. The weather's warmer. People are thinking about summer activities. If you've got kids in school, you're just trying to get through the end of the school year. But anyway, that's why I'm so grateful that you are joining us tonight, and I'm going to try to help you to stay engaged. Now, there are still a couple of hundred bills that are going to get a vote between now and Monday. Some of them are the headline grabbers. Probably, you'll know that the budget is a major task that the legislature has every year. There's also a major energy bill that's under consideration, and there may even be a trailer bill to the criminal justice bill that Democrats pushed through at the 11th hour in January, right before the new legislature got sworn in. Also, right as we speak, there is a House and Senate joint legislative hearing going on to discuss the new legislative maps. Those are likely going to get a vote between now and Monday as well. And then for parents, there are 3 bills in particular that I'd like you to pay close attention to. We're going to discuss all 3 this evening. 2 of them involve schools and school policy, and then the other deals with minors who might be seeking an abortion. So the school-related issues, expanded sex ed, as well as guidelines for the closures of public and private schools in a future pandemic or public health crisis. So we're going to talk about those topics and more on this call. We still have some more participants coming in, joining us on the line. Again, if you are on the phone, you can hit *3 to ask your question. This is State Representative Tom Morrison coming to you live from Springfield. I'm in one of the House committee rooms, and I'm so glad that you have joined us tonight. Again, *3. And let's get started. So the first topic I want to discuss tonight is the state budget. So we're in the final days of the 2021 spring legislative session. Our scheduled adjournment day is this upcoming Monday. And, it's no secret that our state finances have been in shambles for some time, and that's in spite of having one of the highest overall tax burdens in the country. For the years I've been down here in the Illinois House, I've been constantly pushing for spending and policy reforms to curb this chronic overspending and the increase in the debt. And to the best of my ability, I've opposed those policies and the tax increases that really make the state more expensive, less hospitable to individuals, families, and businesses. We do have a new Speaker of the House. Many of you probably heard Mike Madigan stepped down in January. He accumulated more years in that role than any other speaker in the United States history. His successor is a state representative from the western suburbs. His name is Chris Welch. And when he started out in January, he claimed to offer a new day in bipartisanship. But despite that rhetoric, he really has continued to run the House in much the same way that Speaker Madigan did. And we're seeing that most recently and glaringly in the proposed redistricting maps that were just released. You may have heard about this in the news. We'll be discussing more on that later. But back to the budget, even at this late date, and we have just 1 week to go before we wrap up May 31st, we have not even seen or heard what the budget looks like. No budget bills have been filed, and historically, the House and Senate Democrats, they do eventually release that budget. They have to, and they release it to the legislature, myself, my colleagues, and the general public, and they give us usually a few hours to take a look at that. It's 1,500 to 1,800 pages long, so if you can imagine that, it's about this high if it was a stack of paper, and we just get an up or down vote on the entire bill. There's very little discussion about the particulars. It's just an up or a down, and that's it. And so that's not really the way the legislature should operate. But anyway, that's the way we do things here. So with that, we also know that the ongoing effects of the pandemic, monies received from the federal government are not to be used for paying down debt incurred prior to the pandemic. And Illinois expects to receive about $8 billion in federal money from the American Rescue Plan. What I'm trying to emphasize, and some of my colleagues, this is just a one-time infusion of money, and we ought not create new programs or expand programs, because that just becomes part of the expectation, and then we have to pay for those items going forward. So anyway, before we jump into our next topic, I would love to take some questions from some of you that are on the line. Again, if you want to ask a question, *3. And let's see. Let's go to, this is kind of budget related. So Thomas, are you there? Yeah, here, Thomas, you're on the air. Well, that is obviously a hugely important issue. The pension amount, the amount that we spend on pensions as a state, it's one of the largest items in the budget. That, along with Medicaid spending and also education spending. And so I have consistently been saying we have to do pension reform. We need to do it at the state level. We need to do it at the local level, because obviously there's a lot of budgetary pressures on our local units of government too. So I've been very clear about this. We need to have a constitutional amendment. There is language in the current state constitution that says that pension benefits cannot be diminished or impaired. And the state Supreme Court ruled on this a few years ago, and it basically tied the legislature's hands to doing any kind of meaningful pension reform. And so I've said, let's amend the Constitution to clarify that pension benefits can be adjusted on a go-forward basis. I filed many bills to do that. We held a press conference down here in Springfield about a month ago. If you're online, you can go to my YouTube page or my Facebook page, and you can see highlights of that press conference. So I'm going to continue to push for it, because, again, it is going to continue to pressure all other aspects of the state budget, from education funding, human services, public safety, transportation, and it's really putting the state in a financial bind. We have a credit rating as a state of just one notch above junk. So even the borrowing that we do at the state and local level is affected by this massive unfunded pension liability. All right, why don't we go to another call if it's budget related. And I don't see anything else up there budget related. So why don't we just go on to our next topic then. So as the legislative session winds down, I mentioned in the intro, there are several other controversial pieces of legislation that are being pushed. And again, I'm really urging parents to take note of these things. So the first is a renewed effort to repeal Illinois' Parental Notification of Abortion Act. As it stands right now, current state law requires that abortion providers must notify a parent or another adult family member at least 48 hours before a minor receives an abortion. There already is a judicial bypass provision that means that a judge can waive that requirement if the judge sees fit in that situation. The important thing is a trusted adult should be involved, and really for a variety of reasons. Abortion it's surgery, or it's the administration of very powerful abortion-inducing drugs. And if there was a medical or other complication after the procedure, a family member would know what is happening and could help that girl. Illinois abortion providers and their allies, they're trying to repeal this law. As a reminder, parents have to give consent for a whole myriad of things: field trips, sports, any other medical procedure, ear piercings. And so for something that has the potential to impact young girls in our state, we ought to have a proper vetting and public input. The House Republican Women's Caucus proactively wrote a letter to the House Speaker and requested that the proper process be followed, which means, like any other bill, there should be a committee hearing, witnesses should be able to testify, we should have a thorough debate so that members of the public can testify. And again, if it's brought to the floor, we just have to really vet this bill. So I stand strongly opposed to this bill. The other one is a bill that just passed the House Education Committee this morning. It's a committee that I sit on. It's Senate Bill 818. It's also known as the REACH Act. And it would expand comprehensive sex ed starting in kindergarten. in Illinois schools. The bill passed the Senate on a partisan vote, and this morning when it passed the House committee, it got just the bare minimum of yes votes. There are House Democrats that do not support this legislation. I do not. I've got 4 school-age children, and I've looked at the standards. They're very graphic, in my opinion. It's just too controversial. It's not age-appropriate. And again, it would tie the hands of school districts, because if they offer sex ed right now, they would have to, or in the future, they would have to use these standards. And if they don't want to use these standards, then they can't offer it. And I don't think that's a reasonable compromise. The last issue has to do with the closure of schools. So we know that the COVID-19 had a huge impact on local families as well as the state as a whole. And there were some public schools and most private schools that were willing and able to make necessary accommodations to safely offer in-person learning starting last fall. So there's a House bill that now is in the Senate. It's House Bill 2789, and it has the potential to take away these sort of local decisions if there's another public health incident. So that's House Bill 2789. I'm opposed to this, and it is pending in the Illinois Senate. So let's go back to the calls. And again, if you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and hit *3. So let's see here. Tammy, are you there? Yeah, hey, thank you for joining us tonight. What community are you from? Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. And what's your question? Yeah, that is a really interesting topic. Thank you for calling us tonight. Just off the top of my head, I don't know what the current status is on that. I know the governor has issued a number of consecutive executive orders on that, and that is a real problem. Landlords run the gamut from large operators to very small businesses, family businesses, where someone might just have a couple of apartment units, a couple of tenants, and if individuals are just choosing not to pay, of course the landlord still has to pay property taxes, may have a mortgage on that property, other expenses, and so we need to resolve this soon, especially since there is stimulus money that is continuing to go out. There are individuals, if they've been laid off for some reason, they're getting unemployment insurance, and so we need to resolve this very rapidly. Otherwise, I could see another crisis with our apartment dwellings. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I think we need to bring this to a close really right now. Okay, why don't we go to another caller. Mike, are you on the line? Hey, thank you for joining us tonight. Well, I love Illinois, and my family's from here, and I'm doing my best to fight for our constituents. Well, let's get to a question real quick. Well, I would say this, and Mike, thanks for calling. I mean, as I have talked to constituents in the district, by far the number one issue is property taxes, and that cuts across all partisan lines. I ask constituents routinely, what's your top issue as an Illinois resident? Property taxes, and they keep bringing that up. And I kind of alluded to this a few minutes ago when I talked about pensions, but also the number of units of government in Illinois exceeds any other state, even though Illinois is fifth most populous, or now maybe we're sixth, to kind of tag off of what the last caller just said. So we have to consolidate some of these local units of government. Why do I keep doing this? I mean, Illinois is my home. For a lot of you on the call tonight, for those of you watching online, Illinois is our home. We have a lot at stake here. Moving is a very, very difficult, traumatic thing. Families get separated. You have to start over. It's a very difficult thing. And Illinois still has a lot of very attractive assets. But no question, a major consideration for people and some businesses that are moving out of Illinois has to do with just a lack of confidence in what the future holds. And so I'm going to continue to push for things like reform, and that's all that I can do. And I would just encourage those of you, thank you for participating tonight, because a lot of people just complain and then they won't even participate in a call like this, or they won't do anything other than complain. And I'm doing the best I can to reach out to colleagues and get them to understand as well. This is a statewide crisis that we have to solve. Whether you're in the city of Chicago, the suburbs, downstate, wherever you happen to be. And if we start to turn around the policy of this state, I don't think there would be people wanting to move. They would want to stay here. I mean, even people told me, in the last summer and the fall, if they had confidence that Illinois would fix some of its chronic overspending, they might begrudgingly pay more in taxes. I mean, that was a minority view that I heard, but that was kind of that sentiment that we all know that we have to pay taxes. We all know that we have to pay for government, but the question is, what are we getting in return for that? And is there going to be some reform to make people feel like there is a light at the end of the tunnel? All right, let's go on to our next topic. So energy bills. This is another major concern. We all buy electricity, whether you own a home, whether you rent, whether you have a business. There are several competing bills that are being negotiated between leadership, lobbyists in the energy industry, and also the governor's office weighed in on the topic. Now, there are some groups that are pushing for a total wipeout of the fossil fuel energy production in Illinois. They want to completely move to renewable. There are other bills that have a piece of nuclear energy in there. But what I have seen so far, and I also sit on the Energy and Environment Committee, is that I don't want to see something that's going to be extremely expensive to both ratepayers, something that could negatively impact our baseload energy production, as well as result in a loss of a lot of middle income, a lot of trade careers. And the negotiations at this point, they're at a critical stage. There's little time left in the session, and these things can also move very, very quickly. So don't be surprised if at times session goes on to 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night between now and Monday. But my position is, I think the best case scenario is to allow for a competitive energy production marketplace. Everybody in, we've got increasing energy demands, and we've got to provide reliable, affordable energy. And that means there must be a place for nuclear, natural gas, coal, hydropower, wind, solar, as well as, who knows, some unforeseen energy production technology. I just don't want to see the state tie its hands to a particular mandate. And unfortunately, none of the bills that are pending right now would do that. So with that, we've got some other people still on the line, and we've got some other callers. Let's see here. Carol, are you on the line? Yeah, Carol, thank you for joining us tonight. What community are you from? Great. Well, thank you for joining us. Okay, the question had to do with the sex ed curriculum. Now, as it stands right now, Illinois passed a comprehensive sex ed bill about 6 years ago, and it includes 6th grade through 12th grade. I have heard, from educators and other legislators that, there's a lot of satisfaction with the law as it stands right now. There is a parental opt-out. And so that's current law. What this bill would do is expand sex ed from kindergarten through 12th grade. The proponents are requiring that the state would adopt these what are called national standards. Now, don't be confused when you hear the word national. That doesn't mean that there's some, like the federal government was involved in some way. It was just a variety of national groups that came together to put together this plan, and then they're pushing it out to all the different states. So if you go to the Illinois State Board of Education website, you can see some of the current standards. It has different topics, it has subject matter, it has suggested videos. And by the way, this is one of the, I had a problem with the current law, and that is some of the videos that are suggested by the Illinois State Board of Education, I think are a little bit graphic as it is, push the boundaries a little bit too far. You can be the judge of that, but if you'd like to follow up, if this topic is of great interest to you, I'd be happy to follow up with you later, or my staff, and we could follow up later about where you could dig into some of the details about this. But again, it's pretty controversial, and it is not just a one-sided partisan issue. There are Democratic colleagues that I have talked to and know of that are not satisfied with this change. They want the law to stay as it is right now. All right, let's go to another question, and it's a topic that we're going to be coming up with or discussing later on tonight. Hey, Jim, are you on the line? Jim, thanks for joining us tonight. What community are you from? Great. Well, thanks for joining us. What's your question? All right. Well, thank you very much for calling in and listening in tonight. So the question kind of had to do with redistricting, but also just policies in general. I mean, participate in your government. The fact that you're on this call tonight means that you're paying attention. I'm not alone. I mean, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. That's one of the downsides of the pandemic was a lot of us were separated from each other and not really engaging with one another as a community. So that's one aspect is talk, if there's some particular bill or an issue, get engaged. Call your representatives. I mean, so I represent the 54th district, but we also have a state senator, that's Ann Gillespie. She represents the 27th Senate district, so that includes my House district, plus east of me. Maybe you're participating online right now, you don't live in my district, but you're just interested in state issues. Contact your respective state representative, your state senator. Call the governor's office. I mean, the start of the question had to do with redistricting. It's a topic I'm going to go into next, so this is a great segue. But, Governor Pritzker, both as a candidate and I believe as a sitting governor, said that he supports an independent commission to draw the district lines. We as Illinois residents need to hold him to that promise. And so, call that office, write letters, be engaged as best as you can. And then, of course, elections have consequences. Some of these issues were vetted in the last election. Some of them were not. But nevertheless, I have seen bills that have been, it seemed like they were a freight train, headed for passage, and so many constituents jumped in and called and wrote and made their voice heard that those bills were killed in one chamber or the other. And so that still may be the case here, and that's why I want to bring up some of those bills tonight. So I guess we have some constituents who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube, LinkedIn I think we're on, and maybe Twitter too. We're trying to cover all the bases here. Here's a budget question. Let's stop the 11th hour passing of 1,500-page bills. Can you introduce rules in the legislature to prevent that? So I'm really glad you mentioned the rules. I try to remind constituents the two most important bills, or votes, I should say, that happen are right after the new legislature takes office. So in the House of Representatives, we have a 2-year term. We get inaugurated in January, 118 state reps. The very next vote that happens is who will be the Speaker of the House for the next 2 years. And it's those 118 that could potentially be nominated to fill that position. The second vote that happens is, what are the House rules? What are the parliamentary procedures that House is going to operate under? And so we really need to have rules that are more democratic. And I'll leave it at that, and allow for more transparency, allow for more scrutiny. What often happens is there's something called a shell bill. So there's another bill that has worked its way through the process, and then at the last moment, an amendment is added to that bill. Now, normally you think of an amendment being like a sentence change, maybe a paragraph or two. Some of these amendments might be 1,500 pages, 1,800 pages. And that's how there is a workaround to that process, and it's wrong. And the public, you are the ones paying for it. You and I as taxpayers are the one paying for this, and we deserve more scrutiny on some of this. So let's go to another question. We talked a little bit about the tax burden already. Let's see. Let's get into the remap, because I've had several questions come up about that, both in the calls and also online. So redistricting. Some of you know of the term gerrymandering. It's when redistricting is done to favor one party, and usually it's the party in power. And to be fair, this happens in Republican-led states. It happens in Democratic-led states. But here in Illinois, last Friday, right after 7 o'clock, House Democrats finally released their new maps for the legislative redistricting. Now, usually it's the U.S. Census data that is used to create the maps. And so on the House floor, I was actually wearing this mask on the floor because we spent a ton of money and effort to make sure that everybody is counted, to make sure that we have an accurate census count. Because this data is used for a variety of reasons, but one of the most important ways we use this data is to create new legislative maps. We want a principle of one person, one vote, so we have equal representation across those 118 state House districts and the Senate districts. Right now, there's approximately 107,000 residents in each state rep district, and we want to maintain that even though people have moved around, demographics have shifted and such. Well, there are hearings going on. There have been all spring long. There's another hearing going on right here in the Capitol. There will be a few others scheduled this week. And the process matters, and unfortunately, the Democratic majority has ignored that. And you've seen, maybe in the news, there have been dozens of good government groups, newspaper editorial boards that have criticized this process, especially since both Speaker Welch and Governor Pritzker had repeatedly and publicly claimed to support an independent commission to draw these maps. We don't want to continue to allow the politicians to pick their voters by way of this process. And like I said, it affects the House and Senate maps. It also affects the congressional maps, and even the Illinois Supreme Court. Those are districts that are drawn by the legislature, and everybody deserves to have their voices heard. But we've seen, a lot of window dressing, but not an open and transparent process. Again, I put up on my Facebook page a news report that was very, very insightful of this process being done behind closed doors. So I'm calling on residents. Again, call Governor Pritzker's office. You know where I stand on this issue. You can call our state senator, or if you don't live in our district, you can call your respective legislator and demand that we stick to a more independent process to this. All right, why don't we go back to the phones? We're going to answer a few more constituent questions. We have a lot of questions in the queue, but if you'd like to hit *3, maybe you've got a question that, there's a bunch of questions that are very, very similar, and so I'm trying to grab some that are, generally reflective of what people are buzzing about. But go ahead and call *3. I'm sorry, punch *3 if you want to ask a question. Okay, Jane, you are on the line. Thanks for joining us tonight. What community are you from? Great. Well, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. And you also had a question about property taxes. Do you want to get that in too, and then I'll address? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I totally understand. And Jane, thank you for calling. And so it's not just seniors, but I talk to people from all different age demographics, different walks of life. And again, like I said at the beginning of the call, property tax is the number one issue that people bring up. But let me try to address, and I just realized those of you streaming online, you may not be able to hear the callers. And so if you want to dial in, you'll be able to listen in. Otherwise, I'll just post the entire video later, and then if you'd like, you can watch and you can hear everybody. But to address the single, bills are supposed to be one subject matter. So when I talk about the budget being 1,500 pages long or 1,800 pages long, all of those are appropriations. So each one of those is a line item that is dealing with some kind of aspect of the state budget. But it is a massive amount. Now, when I first took office, it used to be that those budget bills were divided up into different topics. So there would be a separate budget vote on K through 12 education, a separate budget vote on higher education, a separate budget vote for public safety, and a separate for transportation, so a separate one for human services. So it was possible to go into the details a lot better and have more legislative scrutiny and just decide, hey, this bill might not have everything I want, but it's generally acceptable. And then starting about 6 years ago, it was just one massive bill. To your question about property taxes, senior citizens, I co-sponsored a bill in the last session that made it possible for seniors to at least have their automatic senior exemption put in, so you don't have to file every single time. And then I've also supported bills to raise the threshold, the income threshold, to qualify for a senior freeze. And so I've tried to do my part there. We have not successfully raised that income level, but I have filed the bills or co-sponsored the bills if other legislators did so. All right, let's go to another topic. And by the way, so we've got about 20 minutes to go, give or take a few minutes. We'll try to get to a few more calls. And coming up in terms of topics that I want to address, I want to give you some updates on the Illinois Department of Employment Security, the Secretary of State's office, Illinois State Police, the FOID card issue, as well as some community events that I have coming up. And so please stay on the line. And again, if you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and hit *3. And let's now go to another caller. Jim McGrath, are you there? Hey, Jim, good to talk with you. Thanks for joining us tonight. You're welcome. Well, I try to be responsive to you when you contact me, and I'm glad that you joined our call tonight. Yeah, I share your concerns very much. I read a really distressing story in the paper. Now, again, it's just what I happen to read, so if I don't have all the details, I apologize. But there was a suburban high school graduation ceremony, and when the Pledge of Allegiance was being stated, apparently the principal, who's retiring, left out certain parts of the pledge. It astounds me. Every day, and when we start session here in the House, we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. It's a reminder for all of us as Illinois citizens, as citizens of the United States, what unites us. And we can have our differences on different policies or whatever, but we have to be united as Americans. And I share your concern. I think some of these issues and the curriculum has a grave potential to divide us even further. We do not need to be divided any more than we already are. I mentioned the Education Committee. I actually sit on two of those committees. One of them deals with curriculum. The other one deals with K through 12 administration. And there was a bill in one of those committees that is pushing the new culturally responsive teaching standards. You can look up those standards. There was a lot of attention put on those earlier in the spring because the Pritzker administration put this through as an administrative rule. And so JCAR, which stands for the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, it's a bipartisan, bi-chamber committee of lawmakers. They weighed this issue pretty heavily, and unfortunately, it's now, as far as I'm concerned, it's now part of the State Board of Education standards. And I think about Martin Luther King Jr. What did he advocate? One of the most famous quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. was that we ought to judge people based on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And I see us moving in the opposite direction and really emphasizing a lot of differences. Whether they're racial differences, religious differences, ethnic differences. We need to remember that we are Americans. America is a great melting pot, and we ought to re-emphasize those things. Otherwise, there is going to be greater division. And so, Jim, I appreciate the call and the question. And let's go to somebody else now online here. So, Joshua, are you there? Hey. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Where are you from? Great. Well, and Josh, you remember, Remember, this is a state call. This is an official forum, so I don't want to really get into all the nitty-gritty of campaigns. That's maybe for another time, but not on this, because I'm in the state capitol right now, so this has to be nonpartisan. But in terms of the balance of power, so there are currently 73 House Democrats. There are 45 House Republicans. That's just what the makeup of the legislature is. And again, on a variety of these bills, you're going to see not just one side or another necessarily. On some bills, that's what you see. You see just a strict divide in terms of the partisan makeup of, on a yes/no vote. But on a number of bills, you will see some Republicans voting for some things. You'll see some Democrats voting against things. That's why I'm really glad that all of you are on this call tonight. So please stay engaged. And I'm just trying to do the best I can to inform you, with the limited time that we have here. Why don't we take one more quick question, and then we are going to, I'm going to go to another topic there. Let's see. Jason, are you there? Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah. Okay, you're welcome. And Jason, thank you for joining us. So as far as the map goes, again, we're likely to see a first version was put out on Friday evening. You can go to Illinois House Dems, I believe, on their website, and you can take a look at that. But we haven't seen the actual bill yet. And so the bill it's actually pretty incredible, a block by block by block description of what these district lines will look like. There are hearings being held right now. There may be a different set of maps issued, 10 years ago. So this process is done every 10 years after the census gets done. 10 years ago, there was a first version put out of maps, and then about a week later, a second version put out. The other interesting wrinkle this time is because the census data is not being used, there probably will be a lawsuit. And that also could force some kind of a change, because again, if the districts are drawn in such a way that there is a huge disparity in the numbers of people that live in each district, then those maps would not hold up in court. I mean, nobody expects a map where there would be exact, to the person districts. But if there was a 5 or 10% disparity in the number of people that live in each of these districts, then a judge probably would throw that out, and you'd have to start the process over. And so that's where there's a big risk in the majority party pushing this through at this point. And then the second question had to do with the parental notification of abortion bill. One of the reasons why I brought this topic up in this forum, even though there's just a week to go in this session, 2 years ago, there was another very, very controversial abortion-related bill, basically to allow for abortions all through 9 months of the pregnancy, and a number of other changes to the state's abortion law. And because there are so many residents that vocalized their opposition to that, that bill was put back in the Rules Committee. And it kind of lay dormant there for about 6 weeks. And then on the Sunday night before Memorial Day, 9 p.m., it was brought up in a committee as an amendment to a mental health bill, and then it was passed out of that committee and then subsequently passed on the House floor. So just because a bill is in the Rules Committee right now doesn't necessarily mean that it's done. If you feel very strongly about this issue, I would continue to call your representative. Well, you know where I stand. You're a senator, and if you don't live in our districts, then make your voice heard on that issue. All right, I'm going to bring up one more topic here. We've had a ton of constituent calls on the Illinois Department of Employment Security, the Secretary of State's office, and FOID card. So I've got some quick updates on that. Real quick, the IDES offices remain closed. Now that's not for lack of trying. I mean, we've been saying, for months now that these offices need to be reopened. Other state offices are open. And there are residents who still have some complicated unemployment issues where they just need to see a person. I mean, I did a video early last year. You can see that on my Facebook page and YouTube where, I called in to try to go through the prompts and was summarily hung up on. So, this is just not the kind of customer service that residents deserve. We've been pushing for more accountability, and we have not been having that, in addition to the fraud, and many of you have been subject to that. Also the Secretary of State's office, and by the way, one other quick point, if you still have ongoing issues, don't hesitate to call my office down here in Springfield or at home. I'll post my numbers on my, on this call and also on my website. Secretary of State's office, they've been recently making a big push to get people to take care of some of the services online. They also have extended the deadlines for your license. So like if you need a real ID, that is now extended until May 3rd, 2023. And if you have a driver's license that expires, those cards are now still valid until August 1st of 2021. The FOID card, there have been some serious delays. Many of you know that. We will try to advocate for you with the Illinois State Police to speed up that process. State law says that those cards are supposed to be issued after just 30 days, and many of you are waiting 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year to get that, and it's just not acceptable. The State Police is in the process of hiring more analysts to speed up those applications, but our efforts in the General Assembly to address this have been stalled. Lastly, just a couple of other upcoming events before we take our last call or two. So for the first time ever, I'm hosting a Kids Week in the district. This is going to be a combination of virtual and in-person events and fit for the whole family. As many of you know, some of the Park District events, maybe it's out of your family budget or it's been canceled or something. So we're starting things off with a bike rodeo. So what is a bike rodeo? Basically, it's a chance for kids to learn and practice their agility, safety skills. We're going to have some experts there from the Secretary of State's office, from the Palatine Police, from Mike's Bike Shop, which is a local shop in Palatine. This is open to all residents of the 54th District. Come on out. Now, you do need to reserve a spot because we need to make sure that it's spaced out properly. You need to bring a bicycle helmet. We've got more details on my website, repmorrison54.com. So avail yourself of that. And another thing, so a Cards for Cops program. We want to encourage our law enforcement officers and their families. And so if you would like, send in a card of encouragement to my district office in Palatine, and we're going to gather those up through May 31st to deliver those to our local law enforcement departments. All right, we have time for another quick call, and then I'll try to answer some of your questions for those online. Okay, Tony, are you there? Hello, Tony. Hey, thank you for joining us tonight. What's your question? Okay, good question. So we don't have anything to do, I'm a state legislator, so we don't have anything to do with federal term limits. But for state level term limits, we actually passed a bill I was very, very proud to co-sponsor to put a limitation on leadership positions. So what is a leadership position? So think House Speaker, Senate President, and now all of a sudden it's escaping me. It's either 10 years or 12 years. But that is more than enough time for one single individual to hold that position because it's an extremely powerful position. With the Speaker's position, I said it earlier in the call, the two most important votes we take as legislators are when the term starts. Who's going to be Speaker of the House? What are the House rules? the Speaker of the House picks the committee assignments, has the power to put a certain person in a chairmanship, and can reward friends or punish enemies. They can put a brick on a bill that they don't like. They can grease the skids of a bill and just move it immediately to the floor for a vote. And so I strongly support leadership term limits. On other term limits, it's really a mixed bag. I mean, there are pros and cons that I'd be happy to discuss with you. I've learned a lot. I've been down here in Springfield for a few years. Just in my first few years, I was still learning a lot about the process. Now I have a much greater understanding of the kind of games that are played, the political games that are played. And so my position is, if the voters want it, if they've thoroughly understood and vetted the pros and the cons of it, leave it up to the voters to decide. But having a limitation on leadership positions is a huge step in the right direction. And then, of course, if we had fair maps, you're going to have more competitive elections. You're going to have natural turnover. I mean, just as if you look at the current makeup of the legislature right now, it's almost half of the legislature has been here for only 4 or 5 years. Half of the legislature. So when people talk about term limits, they're oftentimes talking about someone like a Mike Madigan who is in office 50 years, longer than people like me have even been alive. I'm 46 years old. All right, let's try to do a couple of other comments from those watching online. Line item veto. We actually do have a line item veto. The governor can do a line item veto. They can veto an entire bill, or they can do an amendatory veto on certain provisions of any bill, and then it would be up to the legislature to either approve that change or override that. I think we have time for another question. Let's see. We addressed the budget issue. Okay. All right. Let's go to Aaron. You'll be our last call for the night. Aaron, are you there? Hey, thank you for staying on the line. Thanks for joining us. Okay, go ahead. Okay. Okay. Was there another question you had as well? Yeah. Man, that is a huge problem. And Aaron, you're not alone. I've heard that from many other business owners. And essentially, if individuals make more money by not working, that is going to be hugely detrimental to us as a state. It's going to impair our recovery from this. And so I do not support continuing basically to incentivize people not to work. There's dignity and value in work. And of course, where does the state and the federal government and local government, where does it ultimately get its tax revenue from? It comes from the private sector. The state doesn't collect, no government entity produces tax revenue. It collects it. And if the private economy is suffering, if it's weakened, all that's going to do is just make it harder and harder for us to fund essential services. And so I don't support the public policy that is impairing people going back to work. To your first point about people protecting themselves, I do support the Second Amendment. I do support people being able to defend themselves and their families. I mean, we have seen an increase, a rapid, horrific increase in violent crime in the city of Chicago, in portions of Cook County, even in other suburbs, other counties. And those are not law-abiding people who are committing those violent crimes. I mean, most of those shootings are somewhat gang-related. They are, fighting over turf. They are trying to settle scores outside of the criminal justice system. And so piling on even additional laws to people that are not currently following existing laws or currently respecting human life is not going to solve the problem. I want to support our law enforcers. I want to support enforcing existing law. I think at the county level, again, we have a county prosecutor that is ultimately tasked with prosecuting those crimes. And I would strongly encourage our county prosecutor to follow state law and to keep our communities safe and just to stand behind our law enforcers in doing their job and keeping our community safe. We are wrapping up now, so I would love to just give my contact information. And I just realized I had earlier organized some graphics here for those of you following along online. So here's our Cards for Cops program. Contact me at my district office, send those cards in. Here's some information if you're, again, watching online of the bike rodeo. You have to RSVP on my repmorrison54.com website. And I'm also going to post on the screen right now. Here's my contact information. So if you want to call me at my district office in Palatine, it's 847-202-6584. If you'd like to reach me down in Springfield, and I'm going to be down here through May 31st, late into the evening, you can email me. There's a good chance I'm going to see that email, even if I'm not able to respond right away. But that is, my number down here is 217-782-8026. My email is morrison@ilhousegop.org. And once again, if you were following along on social media tonight and you were not able to hear some of the callers, we will post the video later, and so you can revisit, you can fast forward through different parts of the forum so you can hear everybody. And I am just so grateful that you joined with us tonight. I wish that I could see all of you in person. We would hold these town hall meetings throughout the district, and a year and a half ago, pretty much all that ground to a halt. So this is the best way I can do to stay in touch with all of you. Let me know what my staff or I can do to serve you. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening, and thanks for joining us. Have a good night.